Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be back here. Are you having a good time? Are you learning a lot of things? Yes. Yeah, and we are peppering you with a lot of stuff, aren't we? Okay, just take in as much as you can. It's a lovely opportunity for you. I'm back here to talk to you about whole brain mentorship. Now, what do I mean with whole brain? It is a fact, and researchers now understand that you have some kind of brain dominance. Which hand do you write with? Right. Left. Are there lefties in the room? Yes. Okay. Why is that? Because of a dominance. There's a dominant hand. Which foot do you kick a ball? If I roll you a ball or throw you a ball, which foot will you kick it with? Right. Some will say right, a few will say left. There's a leg and a foot dominance. There's even an eye dominance. You've got one eye that's more dominant than the others. And so all of that relates to your brain dominance, because the brain is the engine in the background. It's like the motherboard of the computer that operates all of these systems in your body. We're going to talk a bit today about brain dominance and your brain profile. And what are your dominances? A dominance means your stronger point. It doesn't mean the other stuff isn't there. It means let's be clear about this from the outset. The good God gave you a whole brain. No, that's our point of departure today. You've got a whole brain. That's why you're clever. That's why you're at university. So your whole brain is working. It's just that there's a certain part of your brain that tends to be dominant. And that is reasonably unique for all of us. And once we understand that, we understand a massive amount of things about how we communicate, how we deal with conflict, how we hear others, why some people frustrate us and we get along with others very easily, why you like some lecturers in their style and others not. Those kinds of things. And therefore, I think, and that's the reason why we included this in your training, if you have a sense of this brain dominance thing and where you are, it will help you in understanding those that come to you for assistance and mentoring. Okay. I think we can agree to some of these goals for our session. And I'll start with a very quick bit of background to the whole brain dominance idea. And you know what? It's actually quite new science. It wasn't all that medical science comes from the time of Da Vinci. But this whole idea that one part of your brain does this and the other part of your brain does that, and it works across, is actually fairly new science. It was in the late 60s only, 1960s. Now, I know you're very young. That sounds long ago to you. But in terms of science, it's not that long ago. No. It was only then that this old guy in the middle there, this one, Roger Sperry, he was a neurologist. In other words, he was a medical scientist who was a specialist in neurology, the working of the nerve system in the brain. And he did some very interesting experiments. In fact, he even got the Nobel Prize for the work he did in 1968. But he did some interesting experiments, and he had this one patient who got very severe epileptic attacks. And the medicine and the stuff that they had available at that time just didn't work. They couldn't treat this man properly. So what they did is they opened up his skull and they disconnected the tissue between the two brain holes. Because if you make two fists like this, do that. Put your thumbs over there, put it together, that's what your brain looks like. And it's about this size as well. More or less the size of your two hands. Now this bit in the middle, it crosses over like this. Can you see that what I'm doing with my hands? If you lock your thumbs, and then you close your fists. That's what your brain looks like on the inside. There's a bit there in the middle. It's called the corpus callosum. And that little bit in the middle makes it possible for this half to communicate with this half. That's where all the messages, it's like the post office there, or a switchboard, where the messages go crisscross. In other words, if this eye, this part of my brain operates this eye. No. So if this eye sees your turquoise T-shirt, it goes into the nerve system, and it goes to my left brain. But my right brain is the bit that processes color, that understands color. So my left brain has to communicate with my right brain and send the message back that I'm seeing a turquoise T-shirt. And that happens in split seconds. But what I'm trying to explain to you, that bit in the middle, that connecting tissue, they went into this patient's brain and they cut that to see if they could isolate the part of the brain where the epileptic attacks happen. Now, obviously, these medical specialists knew a lot of the brain at that time already. And then a few interesting things happened. They observed this person. Apart from the epilepsy, he also had severe behavioral problems. And he got extremely aggressive at times. And it was worse after the operation. And they had him in a room, something like that projector room there at the back with one-way glass and conversations with his wife, and they observed his behavior. And a very funny thing happened one day. Now, I'll explain to you as we go along that certain functions in your brain sits on the right-hand side, and we're going to look at that, and certain functions to the left. But it's important that the two sides communicate so that you can have integrated thoughts and functioning. But now remember, they cut this guy down the middle. And one day they sat looking at him, and his wife had a very nasty argument. You know, like husbands and wives sometimes do. And they were arguing about something. And at that point, but remember now, his body had to make an adjustment. So he wasn't functioning across now, he was functioning one half. So this part of the brain took over the functioning of this part of the body, and vice versa, because they cut it through. And one day, in this argument, they saw that his hand went up to slap his wife, his right hand, right brain, and his left hand came up and grabbed that hand and pulled it back. Now that is a disintegrated action, wouldn't you say? Because if you sit there and you feel like slapping me, you would just sit there. Because your one part of your brain will tell you, man, slap her. And the other part of your brain would say, you can't do that. You know. You see, and there's an integrated thought, so you don't react. Your body doesn't react. But this man had a disintegrated response because that communication wasn't there. But the reason I'm telling you this story about this patient is that made them they started to think now, wait a minute, what's happening here? Because up to that point, they still thought that this half and this half is more or less the same. This half operates this side of the body, and this half operates that side, and that's it. And they didn't quite realize.
I forgot to tell you, must be.
Can you hear me there at the back?
They make a video recording, so you will take it.
Okay, sorry. And they didn't quite realize, but apart from that it's true, it works across. But apart from the fact that it works across, that there seems to be different functions in different parts of the brain. It's not two duplicates, two mirrors, one the same as the other. There seems to be different functions. And there started the whole science of what functions are where in the brain. Today we know that there are certain subsections in the brain. Tell me something. What do you do when you're trying to remember something? Huh? What? or you've forgotten something. You can't recall. People tend to do this, huh? Or do this. When you think hard about something, you do this. Why is that? Why is that? Because here's where the higher order thinking sits in the brain. What do you do when you're completely stressed out? Don't people do this? Huh? Don't people do this? Or do this when you've done something silly? Why? Because a lot of the emotions, the instinctive behaviors, etc., sit to the back of the brain. And so you can carry on and on and on and on and on. We instinctively do certain things because that's where the functions sit in the brain. We'll get back to this a bit. Then, to the right there, you see that little book. A guy by the name of Ned Herman started with linking this issue of brain dominance to learning and behavior. And he developed the first test. And after him, a South African by the name of Kobus Neethling. Now, this is a South African that we're fairly proud of. He's on the World 100 list of who's who because of the work that, in the development work that he's done. And he came up with this brain profile, this very test that you did, that we're going to give you back your results just now. And did quite a lot of work on how we can use this knowledge of the brain dominance. Now, this is just a simplified, but the brain is actually even more complex than this. It's an immensely complex organ in the body. The body can function with... The brain is also a very selfish organ in the body. It takes what it needs in terms of oxygen, in terms of the blood flow in the body, etc. It's a very powerful oxygen. It generates electricity. They've measured that your brain receives about 50,000 messages in a minute. In other words, there where you sit, your brain processes the fact that your bum is on a seat. It can feel the pressure on your bum, that your back is upright. So those physical things in your body, that maybe you need to go to the loo, those kinds of things, your brain processes that. Your brain processes everything that your eyes see and interprets that for you, and if it tells you that's a screen, that's blue, that's green, that's a picture of a human skull, those kinds, it processes all of that all the time. It processes the fact that it's kind of hot and humid in here, what your skin feels, what the nerve ends in your skin observes, etc. It's what you hear, everything. It processes my voice and it puts it into words for you so that you can understand it. All those kinds of things is what your brain does all the time. 50,000 messages a minute goes through your brain. Inputs that it processes. It's a magnificent bit of creation, isn't it? Just absolutely mind-boggling. That's a picture of an actual human brain. If you would take your brain, all our brains look the same color. If you would take it out and rinse off the bloody bits, that's what it would look like. Your brain is also very well protected. This is from the strongest bone in your body, your skull. So if somebody says you're thick-skulled or jy's harrekop, then it's true. It's actually how God made you. It's quite true. You tell them you're sure. Because this is some of the hardest, most dense, strongest bone in your body. And between your skull and your brain, there's a sack of water, a fluid. And that if you bump your head against something, it buffers the shock. It absorbs the shock. And when people get meningitis, it's part of that fluid and the sac around it that gets infected. That's why meningitis is so serious. And it can cause swelling in the brain, etc. But your brain is extremely well protected. That thick bone and that sac of fluid around your brain that keeps it safe also regulates the temperature and keeps your brain at the right temperature. From the back, you can see there in the middle, that connection there, the connective bit. Here comes the spine comes in from everywhere in your body, from every organ within your body, and from all of your skin. All the nerve cells go into the spine and up to the brain and back again. So if you touch your own hand, that what we call an impulse is registered there. It goes all the way to the brain, and the brain tells you what's happening. You've just pinched your own skin, and it interprets that for you. And or if there's pain, if there's a cut in, I've got a cut on my finger, my brain will tell me it's sore. There's pain. I'm observing pain, and I will pull back. Otherwise, if you touch a hot plate on a stove and nothing goes up and comes down again, you won't pull your hand away. Because if I put my hand up on a hot plate, my brain tells my muscles, pull away. And you know how quickly that happens. So that's the speed at which impulses go to your brain and back. Okay. That's what a nerve cell looks like. This has been enlarged 1 million times. So these brain cells are often so small that you can't even see them with the eye if you go into the body. It looks like cotton that you would stitch with. What's gare? Cotton that you would stitch with. Thread, that's the word. It looks like a thin thread. Because these neurons, if you do this, just do this in front of you, all in the same direction, and connect with the fellow next to you. Do like this. Can you see what Nadia and I do? That's how the nerve cells work. They string up through your body, and the message comes in at one point, there from my skin, and it jumps from one cell to the other, up to my brain and back, through these cells. That's what happens. There's a little fluid around these cells that also protect them, and they facilitate that conveying of messages. And when people get things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's or dementia, when the old people get a bit cuckoo, then that's what's happening inside their bodies, is that fluid around these cells disappears, or it gets sick, and then the messages can't get through to the brain. Nerve cells are also non-regenerating. That's why if you cut your skin, what happens? It heals. So your skin makes new cells, and that cut heals, and eventually it's gone away. So the skin regenerates itself. Most parts of the body can do that, but the nerve cells cannot. That's why if you're in a car accident and your back gets broken and those nerve cells are cut off, then you'll be in a wheelchair, because those nerve cells cannot regenerate. They're making wonderful inroads in terms of stimulating them, but they don't regenerate themselves. They can't repair themselves. That's why nerve damage is serious, and it won't work again, that part of the body. Let's get to the brain, back to the brain profiling. This profile that I'm going to share with you just now is built around the concept that the brain has 4 dominant quadrants. A quadrant is, if you've had math, you'll know that a quadrant is a quarter. So there are 4 quarters to the brain. But just before we start discussing that, I want to talk to you about neurological stress. I've spoken quite a bit now about nerve cells and how the messages go to the brain, etc. But it's important for you to understand the idea of neurological stress. If you're going to, the majority of you guys are going to do academic tutoring, aren't you? The vast majority of you. And if you, and it actually doesn't even matter which field you're going to do, but let me use academic tutoring as the example. if a student sits in front of you, a fellow student, a young student, and you are going to talk to them about study, getting good marks, understanding stuff, you have to understand the idea of neurological stress. Neurological, to do with the nerve system. Stress on the nerve system. What causes neurological stress? A lack of water. Let me tell you something today. Stay away from energy drinks, because they dehydrate you and your body loses water and your brain wants water. In the past, you've had teachers and people and counselors and stuff tell you that when you study, drink water. That's why. Your body needs water when you study, because your brain needs that fluid. You must drink water. If you sit and you study for an exam, and you study for a few hours at a time, you have to drink a glass of water every hour. And don't do the Red Bulls and the stuff, because it dehydrates you. It picks up your energy and it lets you down. It's extremely unhealthy. What's more, what you can do for an energy drink is drink red grape juice. It does exactly the same thing, except that it picks up your energy and it keeps you there for a long while, and then it slowly goes, the energy level slowly goes down. Not sweetened, red grape juice, like liquid fruit or something, the natural red grape juices. It's far more healthy if you do need a bit of an energy boost. Red grape juice does exactly the same functionality without the bad effects on your liver and your kidneys, because your kidneys suffer to process energy drinks and the chemicals that they put in there. And then you start dehydrating. You go to the loo a bit more, and your body starts losing energy. Yes, sir. Sorry? Coffee. Coffee is not a bad idea, but you do know that coffee has caffeine in it. And in fact, what most people do not know is that tea, like English tea, also has caffeine in it, about just as much as coffee. And caffeine is a stimulant. That's what they put in energy drinks as well. So it's a stimulant. And like with anything in life, keep it balanced. But you cannot just drink coffee all evening, because then your brain will be in overcharge and you'll be very tired the following morning. Same as with energy drinks. You've got that pick me up, let me down effect. The glucose levels pick up in your body and they drop suddenly. Anybody who's diabetic will tell you it's important to keep the glucose at a fairly steady level. Even if it's a bit too high or a bit too low, but just try and keep it steady. That's what all these low GI foods are for. They do the same thing. They pick up your energy level and they metabolite very slowly things like oats pop and those kinds of things. They metabolite very slowly, so they keep your energy levels, and then they go down gradually. But if you eat Super C sweets, it'll pick you up, and within 40 minutes, half an hour, you'll be yawning, because the energy will drop. And that's unhealthy when you study. So advise your students to get used to healthy study habits. Drink fluids, drink water. You have to drink water. Your brain cannot process some of the chemicals that it needs. And the electricity that needs to be generated in there if you don't drink water. Another thing that causes stress is two-dimensional activity. Give me an example of a two-dimensional activity. Yeah, it's not 3D TV. Two-dimensional activity, sitting in front of a computer. Sitting in front of a book. That's two-dimensional. And there's a steady distance between you and the book, or you and the file, or you and the computer screen. You have to move. You have to move to stimulate your brain. You know instinctively that when you're very tired and you can't concentrate anymore, what do? You sit back. Or you get up. Or you stretch your arms. Isn't it? And that's because your brain is clever. It tells you, please move. I can't work anymore. You know. So, two-dimensional activity can cause neurological stress. It puts stress and strain on the brain functioning. Excessive sitting like this, it's tiring. It's very, very tiring eventually. Because your brain has to tell your body all the time, stay in this position, stay in this position. No, 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 you can't jump up, stay in this position. You know, that type of thing. Emotional stress. That's fairly obvious. Emotional stress can cause neurological stress. You know that when something happens that's very upsetting, it affects your thinking. Then it's hard to think more logical because other parts of the brain take over. Emotional stress. Environmental factors. That's also an easy one. Obviously, you need to ask your mentee. You're familiar now with the concept of a mentee, the person that you are mentoring. What does it look like where you study? Because it is important. I mean, just think now of what I told you about how the brain functions. If you sit here and there is a radio on next to you, what happens? That sound comes in. So your brain is busy processing that as well. What does it do? It distracts from your brain focusing on what you're trying to learn. It really does. There is the principle that some kinds of music is stimulating to the brain simply because it settles the brain. That's why they use certain categories of classic music, because it brings down the brain activity in the brain waves and then the brain can focus. But it's a very select bit of music. You can't do 5 FM while you are studying. Honest to goodness, you can't. Because it divides it literally, physically in your brain divides your attention. Because now a bit of your brain is busy processing this sound that comes in or blocking it out while you're trying to feed in information on the other side.
My brain works better in the simpler subject.
Okay. You all heard the example she gave, that, you know, the more you stress, the more you want to sleep sometimes. And that's fairly logical, because the main function of your brain, you all know the hierarchy of Maslow. That you will fall back on your lower order needs. And the moment your brain is under too much stress, it will start protecting your body. So it will make you asleep to protect you from the stress. But the simplified answer to your question, and I'm not sure whether that session is still coming or whether you've had it, but good stress management techniques, so that you can recognize the stress and deal with it on a logical level. And you almost override the natural response from your brain. But good stress management technique is required so that you can manage the stress so that it doesn't impact negatively on your thinking capability. It's a very important issue that it's almost a whole topic by itself. We can later on, after your basic training, have a follow-up session on those issues and focus on that. And I think most students suffer with that issue. I saw the response when you were sharing your experience. Okay. I was with the issue of nutrition. My goodness, you can't do the slop chips in the exam. You just cannot. Because your brain needs certain things. Your brain needs certain foodstuffs to be healthy, and it's like driving a fancy car. It doesn't help you putting in sunflower oil. You have to put in one of these miracle oils, let's say Caltex or something, for that engine to function optimally. A very, very, very good tip, a simple, everyday thing to do is, particularly in exam time or in your test cycles, eat bananas. Because there are only two foodstuffs that gives your brain enough potassium, and that's bananas and potatoes. Because you do get the nutritional value from both of those. I don't quite understand all the technical stuff about it, but there's intricate nutritional issues around that. But from bananas and potatoes. And now I don't mean the slop chip kind. I mean a nice boiled up potato, or fresh, sort of in a more natural state. It's brain food. Bananas, potatoes, and water. You need those three things. Obviously, veggies and fish. But avoid the carbohydrates when you study. The fatty foods, the big starches, the processed foods with lots of... The problem with processed foods is they have a lot of salt in them. I'm talking polony and Viennas and those kinds of things, ne? Tinned foods and so on. All that stuff has a lot of salt in it. It always has a lot of salt in it. And what happens when your body takes up a lot of salt? You're going to dehydrate. You're going to lose water. It'll make you wee-wee. And your body loses water and your brain needs the water. It affects the electrolyte balances in your body. So nutrition is quite an issue. It's important to think of, what do I eat when I want to study effectively? One would think that these things are less important, but they're critically important. And so we can carry on. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of things that impacts on study. I've just highlighted a few core things that you might be sensitive and alert to when you talk to students. Typical mistakes. We've spoken about eye, ear, hand, and foot, leg dominance. You do have dominant body parts, and those impact on learning and performance. Imagine. Let's say I get my profile back, and I find that I'm left-handed, but I'm also left brain dominant. What's the potential problem there? What's the potential problem there? I'm left-handed, but I'm also left brain dominant. There's a potential problem. Because my left hand is operated by my right brain, isn't it? So what now? It can cause stress for you. What happened to me when I was a full-time student is my notes and stuff would be very neat. But in the exam, I would write like a crab. Like a goggatjie that's run through the ink. And I could never understand this. You know, why would I have such an untidy handwriting when I'm under such stress, while actually I can write very neatly. I write nice block letters and I can write. And only when I studied these things did it hit me. Because I'm right brain dominant and I write with my right hand. It's because in the exam that causes stress for me. Because my left brain has to tell my right hand what to do, the muscles, how to write. And it has to get the information from the right side. Because that's where I recall, that's where I think best. And that causes neurological stress for me. So that now I start writing like a crab, a goggatjie. So those things kind of matter. It's quite complex. And it does have an impact on learning and performance. Let me give you another example. In the past, you've spoken to fellow students and somebody would tell you, listen, this is how I learn. I make mind maps. And I make my mind maps with lots of color and it's all over the place. And you would think, it doesn't work for me. I like my systematic summaries that I can memorize. That type of thing. Or vice versa. You know, somebody would make these nice summaries with keywords and what have you, and you would think, I need color, I need drawings, I need pictures, you know. And it's because of your brain dominance. So you have to understand your own brain and how it operates under stress. Because here's the thing. Here is the thing. When you're hanging around here and you're nice and relaxed, it's not a problem. The whole brain operates nicely, there's no stress in the brain, everything functions. But what happens when you go into the exam room? There's stress on you, and your brain goes into what we can call your default dominance. No. Your brain has, you understand the concept of a default, like in a computer where there's a default setting, or on your cell phone, there's the factory setting or the default setting. And the moment you're under stress, your brain tends to kick in default setting. It can also be when you're in conflict, that type of thing. Your brain goes in default setting, and that influences your thinking. And what that tells us in terms of learning and academic performance is, you better learn in a way that helps you to recall when you're under stress. And that's why study methods are important. You have to understand your brain so that you can apply the correct study method, so that not when you're lying on the couch, then you can remember everything. You've had that experience that you had to mention eight aspects of this theory, and you could recall 5, and you knew them. Yes. And now 15 minutes after you leave the test room, you understand what happened. You understand what happened, yeah? Huh? When the stress was gone, your brain could easily access the information. Because remember this, your brain remembers everything. When you sit and you study, it's in there. It doesn't get lost. The problem with learning is to remember. It's not to get it into your skull. It's to get it out. That's the issue with learning. So you've got to, and that's why we're bringing this whole brain thing into as a skill for you, as a frame of reference when you help others to learn effectively. Because you've got to learn in a way that helps you recall and remember when you sit in the exam. And that's why the same study recipe can work for 4 people, but for the next person it won't work. Because that person's brain maybe functions differently. And you have to have a sense of what's the best way for me to recall. Now, people like yourselves, who's been studying successfully, you've kind of figured it out by now. No. But it's hard sometimes to get to that point to understand this is how I need to learn. Sometimes you need to even go and see somebody to help you with what's an appropriate way for you to learn. And this is what this whole brain thing is about. Let's look at the 4 quadrants of the brain. We're on the right-hand side now, right front. Let's call it the R1, right front, R1 quadrant. If you are brain dominant in the R1 quadrant of your brain, you're the kind of person that likes the bigger picture. You tend to be creative. Creative doesn't mean arty. It can include that, but it can be much more than that. In other words, you're the one that sees something a little differently or comes with another angle to something, that type of thing. You tend to be unconventional. You can go out of the box. You're comfortable with that. It's often people who gets restless. You know, with sitting like this, you start drawing pictures. You know, you start fidgeting. You need to move. It's typically the kind of person that would also study with things like mind maps and colors and highlighters and pictures and all sorts of things. And would move around and talk and learn like this and speak up and that type of thing. That's your right brain dominant person. Can a few of you guess whether you're right brain dominant. Okay. It's the kind of person that's good with experimenting and who's often okay with chaos. You know, it's the person with the untidy desk. I'm not saying always, but very often. Because remember, I'm right brain dominant, but my desk is not untidy. I think Nadia will testify to that. Because I've got certain skills. I've learned certain skills. I can do the other things in the rest of the brain. It's not that I can't do them, but when I'm under stress, I'm into my default mode. I tend to go into my default mode. It's the natural way for me to do things. It's also, it's what comes naturally to me. It's my natural approach. You'll also find, if you start thinking about your brain profile, that when you can function in your dominant mode, in other words, for me, when I can sit behind my computer and I can start playing with ideas and I can start drawing pictures in my mind, or I take out a big piece of paper and I start doing a map and say, okay, there's this factor and there's that factor and this relates to that kind of thinking, then it stimulates me. It doesn't make me tired. But when I have to do things that's in my non-dominant mode, my least dominant mode, it takes energy. Because I've got to do those things, sometimes I've got to do those things purposefully. I've got to think to do those things. But it doesn't mean that I can't do them. Not at all. It's just that when I function in my natural mode, I have more energy. I'd be less inclined to go to sleep when I function in my natural, because that energizes my brain. Okay. The second one, L1. I have a suspicion we've got quite a few L1s in this room. It's the person that likes accuracy and precision. You mustn't tell them, I'll meet you there by the fountain at around 11. You must tell them, I'll be there 11:05. That's what they like. Don't tell me, what did that jersey cost you? I don't know, about 200 rand. So is it now 210 or 190? What is it now? You know, they like you to be factual. Can you are you getting a sense that why you like some lecturers and why you like others more and others less? Of course it's going to be nice if the lecturer functions like you, because it'll be easy on your brain. But if I'm a right brain lecturer and you're a left brain person, and I'm coming to class and I say, guys, whether we start at 11 or 11:15, it's more or less okay. It's not a big deal, and by the way, where were we? That time, I'm now just making extreme examples, but can you see? And if you're an L1 person, it's going to frustrate the hell out of you. And vice versa. If I'm this L1 lecturer, and it's 11 o'clock and it's not a minute after 11, and we were on page this, and today we're on page this +1, but you're the right brain person, and you say, what does that thing look like? You're talking about this. I want to see the picture, Or wait a minute, where does this fit into this theory now? If you're the right brain person, you want to see the bigger picture. It's like when somebody starts telling you a story. And if they're left brain dominant, they either start with the facts, or if they're L2, they'll start with the detail. Now imagine you are now R1. You're a bigger picture person. And you are talking to an L2 individual who gives you the details. Let me give you a good example. Or let me just show you the fourth quadrant as well. L2, this part of the brain, planning, practical, these are your organizers. You will find their files with dividers. Their pencils are sharpened. They're organized, they're practical, they like things to be in order. They don't like you to mess around with their stuff. They don't like chaos. They want things to be in place exactly. When you have a group task to do, They are the ones that will say, okay now, but who's going to do what? Will you be doing this from page this to this, and you will be, so they're the organizers. Now, the L1, the one that we looked at before, they are the ones that will say, what is it that we need to achieve? They're goal-oriented. They're also structured and organized, but they're goal-oriented, outcome-oriented. Whereas the L2 people are extremely detail-oriented. And then your R2, the fourth quadrant, is your feeling people. It's your emotional, your emphatic people. They think about feelings. This is the person in that, if you've got a group assignment, it's the person in the group that will say, listen guys, are you all okay now with your assignments? Are we on the same page? No. And these are important people, because if you don't balance them with the L1s, you know, you'll only be task-driven. And you won't take care of the persons. You lose the people. And you can see why it's important that you have all those skills. You can't just function in one little bit and not do the other things. I can't just be L1 and never care a bit about how I talk to people or how they feel or that type of thing. Or even vice versa. I can't be this emotionally focused, oriented person and just worry about whether you're now very comfortable in your chair, but clean forget about what I'm supposed to achieve here. You see? So I have to do all of those things. My whole brain has to work. But coming naturally, you can even see from my slides. I like color, I like movement. What does that tell you? R1. That's where it comes from. I like the bigger picture. That's why I started with, what's this thing? What's the context of this thing? That's my natural style. Okay. Your L1 students, also the one that will, the L2, the detailed one, the one that will sit in class and be frustrated because yesterday or last week we finished the lecture on page 11. Now, I'm this R1 lecturer and today I'm at another place and you say, excuse me ma'am, aren't we supposed to be on page 12? Because that's your natural inclination. That's how you function. Okay. There's your summary of the 4 quadrants. Now let me tell you a quick story. We've got 5 minutes left and then Nadia will do the handing out of the profiles for us. There was an accident by the front gate. This robot there in front, this morning. I'm the news reporter. And now go and test me. Go and read the newspapers. Or whatever magazine you read. But it's particularly the newspapers. Now, I'm an L1 reporter. Here's my news report. There was an accident by the main gate at peak time this morning. 2 cars involved, nobody injured. The traffic was cleared fairly quickly. What quadrant is that? Can you hear that it's L1 speak? What I want to demonstrate to you is how my brain dominance will influence how I communicate. If I come to you and say, listen, here's my report. There was an accident by the main gate. You should have seen that woman's face. When she got out of that car. She was terrified. Listen carefully. She was terrified. She was a wreck. She was shaking like this. And the other person came across and was so angry. What? Where am I? R2. I'm focusing on feeling, huh? You're right. I'm in the R side now. But I tend to go to the R2 because I observed the feelings and the emotions, and that's what I now speak. If I say to you, there was an accident by the main gate, not much impact, the traffic was on the go very quickly, no big deal. That would be R1, wouldn't it? I'm giving you extreme examples, but I want you to get the feel of how my brain dominance would influence how I see things and how I communicate them. If I say to you, by the front gate, about 200 meters to the left, there was a blue car coming from west to east. Where am I? That's it. That's it. You've got it. That's it. You can see. But can you now understand that your lecturers will also be like that? Your lecturer also has some kind of a brain dominance. And that's why some lecturers you listen to quite easily because it fits your dominance, and others frustrate you because it's so different from you. Because I'd get frustrated with an L2 lecturer. I'd say, yeah, but what happened? Was there an injury? What's the bigger picture? While you're still telling me 200 meters to the left. Or vice versa. I will frustrate an L2 person because I'll say, there was an accident, but it was okay. I could get past it. And this L2 person would say, but who was it? Where was it? Was it serious? You'll want the detail. And that influences our communication. Can you see within a context of learning, if a mentee sits in front of you and you need to help them with it doesn't matter what the subject is. What's the right way for you to study better, to improve that you need to have a sense of this in the back of your mind. Don't you think? That it helps as a frame of reference. One could also argue, and we're doing some research on that a subject also has a brain. And what I mean with that is, what kind of brain goes naturally for accounting? L1, L2, huh? L1, that depends on what sort of accounting, auditing, whatever. But it comes naturally for your L brain, isn't it? What sort of brain goes naturally for nursing? Yeah. That's where the problems come in. If you don't have a nurse with no R2, then they're going to slap you around. Isn't it, huh? But they can't only be R2 because they also have to be L1. An airline pilot. Would you want your airline pilot to be R1? No. Huh? When something goes wrong, yeah. You don't want them to be a bit creative up there in the air. You want them to follow procedure. You want them to say, I'm at 55,000 feet. Not, I'm more or less there. And so every job and even every subject in an academic program, every career tends to have a typical brain. So in whatever field you function in, there'll be kind of a majority of certain brains. But as human beings go, we are all unique. And if we had time, we could say all the L1s up there and the L2s there, and we'll have a reasonably equal division of people here. Yeah. It can. It can change. It can shift, but it's unlikely that it will shift dramatically. What can happen? Let me give you my own example. I was R1 off the page, up there, and very little L1. But when I came into a management position, I had to learn those skills more and more, and it became a way of doing for me. So when I answer the assessment, naturally, I'll have more L1 answers.
So it could also depend on how you answer the questions back then.
To a small degree. To a small degree. There are checks and balances in the questionnaire, but I have experience of fairly major shifts. As life experiences change, as your personality develops, etc., etc., there can be a shift. Because of exposure, because of environment, because of what's possible for you. Yeah.
So you're not singled out to being only left brain or only right?
Not at all. Not at all. You can be you usually have a major dominance and a second dominance, and it can be across.
From what you've given us, I'm majority L1 and R2.
It's possible. It's possible. If you've got you'll see when you're now going to look at your profiles, and there's a good solid description, and Nadia will discuss it with you a little bit. But you'll see that you normally, you'd be R1, R2 kind of thing, or L1, L2, that mix, because those things are closely related. But you do get individuals that have a crossover dominance, that have a R1, L2. So the R1 person will come up with a funny idea and then make it work. And give structure, give ideas, and start making it work. And vice versa. Your L1, R2 person would be very organized, very goal-focused, but sensitive to people. That type of thing. So you can have a crossover dominance. Sometimes it's the two difficult dominances, the crossover ones, because those things are opposites. So it's conflicting dominances, but it does happen. It certainly does happen. Okay. To end off with, I think there are. It's time. I think there are some benefits in us having had this discussion. You can hear from what we're sharing, it's sort of the tip of the iceberg on the topic. But giving you a taste of it, giving you a sense of this whole brain dominance concept. And the idea is not that you need to be the specialist in it, but that first of all, the most important thing is that you gain knowledge about yourself as a mentor. So that you understand how you communicate, why you communicate in certain, why some people frustrate you, why you get along with others easily, what your language is like, etc., and enhance your own functioning as a person. And then in the second instance, as a mentor, to see to your communication. Because if I have an appointment with you and you're going to help me with my math today, and I come into the room and I'm crying, where am I? If I come into the room and you can clearly see I'm upset, I'm crying, my boyfriend left me last night, I'm upset. So where am I? Then I'm in the R2 mode. Is it going to make sense for you to say, okay, you know what, it's 11:11. We need to start with this chapter. Where do you need to meet me? In R2. You need to say, I see that you're upset. And you don't have to be the counselor then, but you need to acknowledge where I am and then hook me into communicating with me. And even vice versa. Okay. This is young.
I believe most of us will not trust and realize that after 3 years that this process will be out.
Yeah, it's such an important thing that you're mentioning, and I think even in this room there'd be people that sit here that will tell you, if I had to choose now, I'd choose differently. And it's a tragedy that many people land up in career paths and in academic programs because that's where the bursary was, or that's where I could get into in first year. And not because it's the thing that suits me, that suits my personality, and that suits my brain and my interests. And of course, some people do change over time. That can also happen. But if you come across such an individual where you have a sense that this person it's not a good fit for where they are at, advise them to go and see the counselor on their campus. Because that's what the SDS team is there for. To then sit with that individual and plot and see, how is there a possible route to get you to where you should be. And help that person on a one-on-one basis to figure that out. Then professional career counseling can kick in. So if you do come across such cases, don't hesitate to advise them, let's make an appointment for you. Okay, just go and talk to somebody and refocus this. Because that kind of scenario impacts on motivation and all sorts of things. It has all sorts of other repercussions. Finally, just in conclusion, I think the idea of the brain dominance will help you in advising others on study skills and methods and, you know, how should you learn. Decision making. Very important, stress management. You could add a lot of things to this list. And, of course, understanding your lecturers, team members, when you have group assignments, those kinds of things. I hope it was of some value for you. I'm sure that there might be more questions if needed and if you want. Nadia can arrange a follow-up for us somewhere later in the semester, and we can talk about these things again. But I do trust that this bit of knowledge is going to be helpful for you. Thank you very much.